Hey y'all, happy Tuesday. I usually see y'all on Thursday, but we're doing this one a little early. And sorry I'm late. It's the camera, but we are using the camera, so it looks pretty good. The camera and I are having growing pains. We're figuring it out. I'm figuring it out. So today we are going to talk about Chef Way and the DA and colorism, particularly in the criminal justice system in Harris County, and some statistics, and whether or not Chef Way is actually going to face any legal discipline because outside of being a chef who thinks it's appropriate to not have bone in his oxtail, he is also a licensed Texas attorney that happens to work for the DA's office. So we are going to get into this right now. All right. So here is our agenda. First, what did he do? Chef Way and the Misogynoir, particularly his Misogynoir directed at dark-skinned Black women. We're going to talk about Harris County, their convictions, and race, and particularly why I think it's really interesting the route that their office is going because they are choosing at this point in time not to discipline him. And next, and in terms of what discipline is, when you are an attorney, if you do anything that the state bar, because you are barred in the state, there is no federal reciprocity in that manner in the U.S. You receive discipline by the ethics committee of the bar in your state, but it first would start with your job. So that's why it's discipline, the term. And then after we talk about Harris County and their conviction history, we're then going to get into colorism and the criminal justice system and a little bit of sip and discuss. All right, so let's go through this. Oh, good. I'm glad it was worth it because I was actually on time for once. The camera was not. All right, so let's go. Exactly. Anybody removing the bones from their oxtail? I don't trust it to begin with. So let's get into this, okay, if the computer wants to work. So Chef Way, the colorist. Now, I am not going to show all of the receipts of what he decided to post in his big age. I would like it to be noted that according to the internet and some digging, he's either 31 or 32. When he made these posts, he was around 25, 26. He was not a child. He knew what he was doing. However, there are some of the receipts that I'm going to show as well. Specifically why I'm not going to show the women's faces that he decided to demean and derogatorily speak about because it's inappropriate for him to have done in the first place, and they don't deserve to see their face splashed around the internet in this awful manner. So let's start with some of the tweets, and on the bottom is his oxtail pasta. Oxtail don't belong in pasta, but anyways, that's my business. This man told me I needed to unalive myself. This is a tweet from one of the women that he harassed years ago after my arrest and harassed me for no reason. I didn't harm anyone or do anything to anybody. And he used a time in my life when I was homeless and poor as a formerly incarcerated woman to kick me down even further. And then from this other woman, I was there. I saw those tweets in real time. He bullied dark-skinned Black women and girls to the point where they deleted their accounts. But he wants to be a viral influencer. How many girls gave up because of his harassment? Does Chef Way think about that? Probably not. And this is one of his tweets. Let me remove myself so y'all could see. When his account, I'm not sure if the account is still titled the same thing, Waymo the God. If Black lives mattered to Sandra Bland, she wouldn't have taken her own life. I'm serious too. It is ironic and disgusting that he decided to bring up Sandra Bland when he also works for the district attorney's office. And it was a district attorney as well as a police department that failed Sandra Bland. And that is not what happened to Sandra Bland. But anyways, we won't get into that. So from the change.org petition, which we'll go through at the end, these were some of the comments that he made. Black, and then he used the beat. Can I say that on here? Probably can. Make good for punching bags. It's not only distasteful, inappropriate, and colorist tweets, it's also very violent tweets that he decided to put out against dark-skinned Black women for, again, no reason whatsoever. Not that there would ever be a reason to warrant the things that he said. Real Beauty versus Weave and Lies, showing a white woman next to a black woman. She's Too Black, as he said about this beautiful dark-skinned woman. See No Difference, next to a picture of another black woman. And next to the picture of the black woman was a picture of a literal landfill. Shaking My Head, the dark one messed up the photo, he said, about a dark-skinned woman and a white woman in a picture. And then the Sandra Bland comment again. It is very, very disgusting behavior. And again, this is not made from, it's inexcusable at any age, but this is not from a child. It was a grown adult when he decided to say these things. Okay, to the next. And then his mother chimed in. Waymo the God mom does not approve. So I guess that's still his Twitter handle. And stated, I'm his mom. I raised him exactly opposite of the BS he's spewing. I do not condone his ludicrousness. So I'm glad that she said, listen, don't bring me in it. I didn't teach him to do any of that. He's full of nonsense and clearly has spoken to him about it numerous times. Because usually what happens when people and their violent colorism comes out, people like to blame, like, oh, what happened to the mother? This, that, and the next one has nothing to do with their mom, usually. And as she stated already, this has nothing to do with her. To which he decided, and this is his pinned tweet, to make this statement. To those I've hurt with my past tweets that have resurfaced, I'm deeply sorry. That was a moment in my life where I was sick in more ways than one. Cooking saved me. You have watched a flawed man heal. I will continue to heal and learn. Thanks for being along for the journey. He claimed that he was sick. I suppose he had food poisoning. It's a very lackluster apology. It doesn't directly say anything about the victims of his violent harassment and abuse. Nothing, just, oh, well, I'm learning, I'm doing better, and, I have no proof that I've done any better, but hey, just take my word for it. And the reason why this is a legal issue largely is because he is an assistant district attorney in Harris County. Harris County is the county that Houston, Texas sits in. And the district attorney decided, Miss Kim, the district attorney of Harris County, decided to make this statement. Let's make it a little bit bigger. We've recently learned of comments he made on social media posts nearly 7 years ago. It was 6 years, but attorneys, when they're trying to distance their client from something or distance their colleague from something, you got to say the longer length of term. And it's technically not a lie if you say nearly. These posts were inappropriate and offensive and do not reflect my values or those of the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Mr. Wesley has explained that these posts came during a period in which he was struggling with serious personal issues, including alcohol addiction. It should be noted, alcohol addiction does not make you a colorist. Alcohol addiction doesn't make you a racist. Alcohol addiction doesn't make you any of those things. Will it exacerbate that you are a jackass of a person? Yes, most likely. Prior to joining our office, Mr. Wesley went through treatment and has worked with the State Bar of Texas to resolve his issues. His recovery is ongoing. I am a believer in second chances, and Mr. Wesley has conducted himself professionally since joining our staff. I am confident that will continue. By making this statement, not only is she viscerally incorrect in siding with him to begin with, she has opened up the entire district attorney's office to a host of liability. All it is going to take is one person in that office simply saying, hey, you know what? Actually, Mr. Wesley has harassed me X amount of times. And y'all would have known that if you believed those tweets that those women had told you. Also, it should be noted, and I've said this numerous times, I'm never a fan of any prosecution office because there's highly problematic, which we're going to get to in a second. Now, I think it should be noted and maybe a reminder to the district attorney what the district attorney's office is supposed to do with our taxpayer money, specifically the taxpayer money of everyone that lives in Harris County. The Harris County District Attorney's Office is dedicated to making our community safer through evidence-based prosecution and equal justice for all. This means guaranteeing a fair process to obtain a just result for the victim, the accused, and the community in every case. For you to have an equal justice, evidence-based prosecution, if that can exist in the United States, that would mean you'd have to remove the bias, which employing somebody that is so heavily and violently biased against a marginalized group, which is dark-skinned women, I'm not exactly sure how they're supposed to conduct an evidence-based trial with that. And to note, the guiding principles when you swear in and you work for the district attorney's office of Harris County are, I think it's funny, first and foremost, to use taxpayer money efficiently, that's the first one. Clearly, maybe they had some issues with that to begin with. However, to strive for equality in our use of prosecutorial discretion, to treat all crime victims with dignity and fairness. I do not believe somebody saying all of those awful things about dark-skinned Black women, particularly positioning Black women next to a literal landfill, can treat somebody with equality and treat a victim who most likely, because dark-skinned Black women and Black women in general are the victim of violent crime more often than our white counterparts, which, if we look along the color spectrum of who is on the receiving end of more violent crime, it is more so dark-skinned Black women than light-skinned Black women. How is he going to advocate for those victims if he has said multiple times that he essentially hates dark-skinned Black women? How is any of that possible? To actively seek input and participation from the diverse communities of the greater Houston area. How is he able to seek participation from the diverse community of the greater Houston area when he has largely shunned any accountability by turning his comments off on TikTok and deleting comments? I'm just curious. But the DA believes in second chances for certain people. It's truly, to be honest, in my standpoint, before we even get into his problematic behavior, it doesn't behoove the DA to stand behind him. So I find it very odd, to be honest, besides the fact that they're essentially virtue signaling like, hey, we don't give a shit about Black women over here in Harris County, so it is what it is. Now, Harris County is has one of the largest jailed populations in the United States and in Texas. And it should be noted what type of county we are dealing with in the first place. So this is from Care Not Cages, Stop Racist Policing and Jailing in Harris County. Some facts. I make myself small so y'all can see. Significant racial disparities. So in terms of what we're going to go through in our live, we're going to first look at Harris County altogether, racial disparities. Then we're going to look at racial disparities in the criminal justice system for a second. And then specifically, we're going to look at colorism. So if you're just joining, that's the order of operations for today. All right, so let me move me so y'all can see. Significant racial disparities exist in jails across the country, and Harris County is no exception. Harris County, Black people comprise nearly 20%, about 19.7% of the population. And this is from 2017, because that's the way the census, the last one, this was the most up to date. So most of the stats we're going to look at today are 2017. We have a few from 2020. Yet from March 1st, 2015 through March 1st, 2018, made up Black people, that is 45% of bookings in the Harris County Jail. And that is not because Black people committed more crime. That is not the reason. And we'll get into the reason in a second. And served 51% of the nights in jail, over 3.9 million combined nights. To be noted, 51% of the nights in jail, that Black people only make up 20% of the entire county. Just to see how preposterous this is. Now, the graph is showing Black people are disproportionately shown in red. You have Latinos slash Hispanics in green, and then the white people in blue, and then other is mostly categorizing mixed race as well as Asians in yellow, which that's problematic, but I didn't make that graph. All right, and this is the Center for Justice Research. Black residents represent 50% of all bookings into the Harris County Jail. The other had it at 47%. This one has it at 50%. And again, it's for the same set amount of time. And largely, if people are wondering like, oh, well, that number is there because y'all are doing crime. That is not true. Black people are more likely to be pulled over and searched in the first place and then be arrested, whether rightfully or wrongfully. Mostly for a lot of these crimes were for small possession crimes. So Black people were over 55% of the bookings where the lead charge was marijuana possession under 2 ounces. If you are familiar with the tree, 2 ounces is not a lot. It's not distribution. You're not selling it to anybody. It's personal use. And over 59% of bookings for 2 different forms of trespassing and motion to revoke parole. Among lead charges leading to the most nights in jail, Black people were most overrepresented in being charged with manufacture or delivery distribution of less than 1 gram of a controlled substance. Given how little less than 1 gram is, it is also suspect that so many could have been charged with dealing the drug. You're not dealing if you have a gram. Nope. Come on. It's a small amount. Like, it's barely anything. Let us continue. So this is the 2017-2018 racial profiling reports. Due to the disparity in which Black people were searched overall, they ultimately represented 61% of the total searches by the police in 2018. So here you have the number of traffic stops. So in 2018, 355,000 total traffic stops. Of those traffic stops, 36% total were Black people. Mind you, Black people, again, are only 19% of the population in Harris County. And that resulted in a search. 12% of the 36% resulted in a search, versus if a police officer stopped a white person, it was only 3%. Obviously, the additional searches, A, most likely are unwarranted. B, if you are being illegally searched, you are more likely to be illegally detained. Okay. Now, it doesn't just cross over in terms of adults. It's also apparent in how children are treated as well. So let me hold on, my definitions over here. It's a little bit different. So in Harris County, instead of being charged for a crime like adults, juveniles are referred to the court. So it's in terms called referrals, and then the court is allowed to decide whether they put children on probation, pursue incarceration by charging them as a minor or as an adult. Black children are more likely than not to be charged as an adult than their peers, and other repercussions. So there's also pretrial detention, things like that. So with that, in 2018, juvenile felony referrals comprised about 19% of the total referrals in Harris County, the largest increase in 27 years. Under whose watch? Who's the DA? Yes, the DA is Kim Ogg. I think OGG. I think that's how you say her last name. I think that's very interesting. Also to note, across all three counties, it's looking at Montgomery County, Fort Bend County, and Harris County. Black youth are referred at more than 2 to 3 times the rate of white youth. Okay, now adding gender. So we've done race. Now let's add gender to the equation. Can y'all see this? Okay, good. Per the chart below, half of the women in Texas Department of Corrections are white, which proportionally, that makes sense. It should be noted that while Black women make up 12% of the overall Texas population, Black women comprise 26% of the incarcerated women population, as seen here. And Hispanic women are also somewhat overrepresented a little bit as well. I thought this statistic was really interesting, particularly because people are of the belief that women receive less harsh punishments, which sometimes they do overall if you look at federal and national registries, but that largely has to do, once you intersect with race, Black women are receiving harsher punishments. And in Texas, what I found very interesting, the majority of women incarcerated are actually nonviolent offenders. So these are women who have no history of violent crime. 64% of them, which serve on average 8 years in prison, are nonviolent offenders. And if you juxtapose that against gender between men and women, women in Texas actually, for nonviolent offenses, far outpace men. So if you are a woman who committed a nonviolent offense, or if you have been accused wrongfully of a nonviolent offense, you are more likely to go to prison than your male counterpart, with 64% of women incarcerated compared to 42% of men incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. Oh, Lord. And on to the colorism. Okay. So now that we have the basics out, the interesting thing when you start to do research about colorism is, first, a lot of people are in denial about how much colorism impacts people in the United States, Black people in the United States. A lot of people, interestingly, surprisingly, and I'm glad, when this came out about Chef Wei, immediately came out and said, this is awful, he's awful. It is the quickest that we have seen misogynoir addressed. I would say not punished, but addressed. Not corrected, but addressed. This is the fastest. However, doing my research, have been a growing amount of papers trying to address, like, okay, we understand that racism is an issue. Colorism is an equal issue because when we have racism, who is disproportionately impacted by racism? It is darker skinned people. Who is disproportionately impacted when you look at gender? It is dark skinned Black women. So this is from Robert L. Reese, who is a professor, I think, at UT Austin. And he has this paper called The Missing Social Movement, Colorism in Black America. Highly recommend. Actually, let me put it in the chat. You know what? I'm going to link it because the link for some reason is very long. It looks like a paragraph. So recent studies reveal that darker skinned Black Americans are considerably more likely to experience violence at the hands of law enforcement, receive longer criminal convictions for the same crimes, and suffer an economic penalty of thousands of dollars relative to their light-skinned counterparts, among a wide variety of other social economic inequities. In some cases, the gap between the social and economic outcomes of light-skinned Black Americans and dark-skinned Black Americans are as large as the gap between white Americans and Black Americans. And just to remind you how wild the gap is between white Americans and Black Americans, the average single Black woman net worth by the time you hit 40 will hopefully reach $0. Zero net worth. Like, you know what? Okay, my debt is maybe gone. Maybe I have a little bit, but I have a little 401k. The average net worth of a woman, of a white woman of that same age is around, if we're talking college degree, $200,000. And shout out to Julesy and her Patreon. I watched the video she did on that, and the statistics were very shocking. The statistics were very, very, very shocking. If you then add colorism into the factor, the statistics are even worse, which we are now starting to get to that, where people are pushing to do more research into that area. So I think it would be helpful to start with colorism is not a new issue, obviously. Colorism is deeply rooted in not just the United States, in the Caribbean, also in Africa as well. Anywhere that has been colonized, we have colorism, I would say. So just to get somewhat to what I thought was really interesting when the paper was laying out the history, prominent Black American leaders have explicitly downplayed the relevance of color to American racial politics and championed the need for Black unity to combat racial segregation. It is not, divisive to talk about colorism. We are not all going to get free until we talk about it and we address it and we stop doing it. In 1921, after Marcus, which I'm going to mention Marcus Garvey, a lot of great things, a lot of problematic things. W. Du Bois, again, a lot of great things, a lot of problematic things. So take that for what it is. In 1921, after Marcus Garvey criticized the NAACP for its lack of dark-skinned Black people in leadership positions, which wildly has not changed through a lot of Black organizations, W. E. Du Bois countered in Crisis magazine. There is no doubt what Garvey has sought to import to America and capitalize the antagonism between mulattoes and Blacks in the West Indies. This has been the cause of West Indian failures to gain headway against the whites. Yet Garvey imports it into a land where it has never had any substantial footing and where today of all days it is absolutely repudiated by every thinking Negro. Garvey capitalizes it, and it has aroused more bitter enmity inside the race than has ever existed before. According to W. E. Du Bois in 1921, there was no colorism amongst Black people in America. That was just a Caribbean thing, and only we Caribbean people were arguing about it, which I find comical and incorrect. And also, it should be noted, and from the article, not only did W. Du Bois scold Garvey for attempting to bring attention to light-skin uniformity of Black American leadership at the time, he argued in sharp contrast to the evidence that was available to him and us, that colorism never held any substantial footing in Black America. It should be noted, in Jamaica specifically, this is George William Gordon. He's one of the 7 national heroes of Jamaica. He was a mixed race man. And in the late 1800s, he led the St. Thomas revolt. St. Thomas is where my family's from in Jamaica, the parish, not the country. And in doing so, he led the revolt because dark-skinned people were not being treated well. They were not being paid, even though emancipation had allegedly occurred. And for that, when he used his light-skin privilege, some concessions were eventually made, but not after him and many of his dark-skinned counterparts were hung in the square. So it would behoove all of us Maybe you don't have to give the ultimate sacrifice, but to say something and to do something, because if we are suffering, one of us is suffering, we're all suffering. So, colorism denial continues to run rampant, and even those who acknowledge the impacts of skin tone on the life experiences of Black Americans may be reticent to admit or completely unaware of the magnitude of its impact. I think now in 2023, we're getting a lot of people who are more aware of the impact of colorism, but are very much reticent to and unwilling sometimes to admit the full impact, because a lot of people feel like it's an either or. If I admit as a light skinned person that you're getting treated worse than me, does that mean I'm not being treated bad? No. Two things can exist at once. Three things can be true at once. Five things can be true at once. Prioritizing race over color in regressive social policy has created ready-made targets for progressive race-based policy, but leaves a gap in our understanding of how to target color specifically. And that's largely been an issue. Yes, this is true. Listen, oh man, I'm forgetting the PM's name right now. Is very much light bright. He's very much light. Sister Pat was like the last brown skinned person in power in Jamaica. All right. Exactly this. People are triggered by talking about colorism. It's insane. If we don't talk about it, how are we going to change that it exists, obviously, and that it exists at disproportionate rates and actually has huge impacts and harms people? So we are going to now go into this before we get into the policing and colorism. So colorism and the killing of unarmed African Americans by the police. In this article, they focused on a few studies, and essentially they added Andrew Holness. I was like, what is the man's name? I'm forgetting his name. Yes, Prime Minister Holness. I saw him years ago when I went to watch Bolt's last run. So in this study, thank you, Themis. In this study, the researchers they looked at pictures of people who had been murdered by the police in the United States, of Black people, and assigned a number to their skin tone. Largely, if you've ever worked in engineering, or if you ever worked in tech, largely the unsaid thing about tech, which is really interesting, and about corporate is very much aware of colorism, particularly if you look at marketing materials. When you are trying to market to somebody, they assign a number to each skin tone. So they're like, okay, we'll put Stephanie at 4, and we want the beige. We want a little bit light, maybe a little bit brown. We're doing this. They know what they're doing. And so for this study, they use the same concept of let's assign a number to the skin color. And let's see if the darker skinned you are, if you're more likely to be impacted by police violence. In this specific violence is police murders. So the skin tones were rated 1 through 9, with 1 being the lightest and 9 being the darkest. So that way you know what the numbers mean as we go through it. So in a prior study, 1999, 2014, also found that police killed darker African Americans more than there are light counterparts. The median skin tone in that study was 6. Now, again, the lightest is 1 and the darkest is 9. So obviously it's skewing towards darker skin Black people. We also found that police killed darker African Americans in the 2015-2021 study. So this is a much more recent study than the other statistics. The average skin tone in our study that was just conducted was 7. So again, if the darkest is 9, obviously it is leaning towards darker skin Black people are targeted more by this. Okay. We use the same scale for color, which is the scale I just told you. Okay. We are more confident that colorism is a key factor in police killings. And that study then goes through everything else. Just to throw this in there, because, hold on, the camera said, that's what I keep forgetting to do. I have to reset the camera to last for more than 30 minutes, but that's okay. Here we go. Now we're just on the regular camera. We are focusing on Black people. Hispanic is an ethnicity and not a race. So looping in the Afro-Latinos, because largely, I think it's fascinating. We could talk about colorism in Hispanic culture all day. It's very long. If you think colorism in Black American and Caribbean culture is bad, colorism in Hispanic culture is even worse. because it's something that people do not want to talk about. And because I'll always be Maiden-Dade, this one is specifically about Miami-Dade County. So I thought it was really interesting to just drop this in here. So by linking official court records and mugshot photographs of a sample of 6,523 adults arrested in Miami-Dade County between 2012 and 2015. So these are a little bit older. We took the role selection in shaping the association between skin color and punishment in sentencing. We find colorism in conviction and incarceration and show the selection process partly accounts for some of the association between skin tone and punishment in sentencing. Let me remove me so y'all can see this. These findings are driven by Hispanics who are categorized as Black. So no matter what you want to call yourself, and of course you can have intersectional identity, if you are darker skinned in this place, you are going to face a larger problem. So this study then went into this not so black and white and algorithmic approach to detecting colorism in criminal sentencing. And I thought this was really interesting in the intro. Analyzing interracial disparities is further complicated by the fact that it has been historically difficult to accurately and consistently measure skin tone and Afrocentric features. Specifically, when they mean Afrocentric features in the United States and the Caribbean, what they mean is West African and Central African features. That's what people have typed as Afrocentric features, which is why people be giving the Habesha girls a hard time. But that's neither here nor there right now. So the paper then did a very interesting application of machine learning, which I'm going to show a picture of it in a second, where utilizing photos of individuals rather than human label classification of skin tone. So all the other studies had people look at it and assign like, so-and-so is this number and so-and-so is this number based on the color. This instead used machine learning. So the idea was hopefully it's more accurate. The project utilizes this improved measure to study how discrimination varies through this spectrum in several ways. As sentence length increases, the average complexion darkens. This is seen, and this is done on people who are incarcerated in the state of Mississippi. This is seen most clearly in the jump from 5 to 10-year sentences to 10 to 20-year sentences. The trend is most pronounced in the second row, Black, but can also be seen for white prisoners as well. The visual evidence suggests that there may be a connection with darker skinned individuals and longer sentences. So this is the visual and the saliency map of what they used. So the above analysis suggests that the classifier is capturing relevant characteristics in its decision, both facial characteristics and skin tone. It's difficult to disentangle the importance of skin tone versus facial features for the classifier. This distinction is further complicated as the two features can be correlated. Essentially, what they are saying is colorism and featureism. If you have West African and Central African features, you are more typed as Black, as Afrocentric, and if you are darker skinned. So without discussing if you want to add texturism in their hair, this is looking at men. If we were to look at this study, if they were to do this study with women, adding texturism would be a given because the trifling trifecta of texturism, featureism, and colorism mostly impacts negatively darker skinned people who have unambiguous West African and Central African features. All right. Now, to bring it back to, because we're specifically focusing on dark-skinned women, there are sadly, the majority of the research I did focused on either race and gender. So then you talk about Black women altogether, or it focused on colorism, but mostly focusing on men, or it was one race or gender. There are very few studies that specifically look at how dark-skinned Black women are disproportionately affected negatively in the criminal justice system. However, a few years ago, actually, we're 2023, maybe 10 years ago, it started being brought up to school boards' attention that darker-skinned young girls were more likely to be put on suspension, and suspension has shown to be a correlation, which if you start with suspension, and sadly, in some of these schools, they do call the police, which is unnecessary. Every other year we see a video of the police roughing up some young Black child for no reason in the school. There is a correlation between being suspended from school and also being wrongfully detained. So this study then went into the role of colorism in explaining African-American female suspension risk. So this is young Black girls. And there is a higher correlation for dark-skinned young women to be suspended from school, because again, all of the negative attributes are then put on young Black girls, young dark-skinned Black women. Thank you, James. All right. Yes, and depleting cloud, this technology is not being monitored. This technology is, I would lean towards problematic in that it can be useful to show like, hey, clearly we have a bias issue in our sentencing. We have a bias issue in who we arrest, all these things. But when it is run unchecked, when you run machine learning, AI unchecked, AI machine learning has already proved to be very racist. This study is trying to combat that, which is good. However, I would be curious to know, did they ask permission from all of the inmates who they just took their faces? And the answer is no. I think they use their mugshots, which you don't need privacy permissions for that. So with all of that being said, the question is now that we have shown through many different data points, a lot of research analysis, people much smarter than me in the study that showed that darker skinned people are more likely to be negatively impacted by the carceral state. In that study, it had math in it, all of these things. Is it still appropriate for District Attorney Kim to have, I think her last name is Og, I don't want to say it wrong, to have this stance that she thinks that Chef Wei is redeemable when she has no proof or evidence that they are redeemable? And the answer is no, in my opinion. The answer is vehemently no, because as a district attorney, which putting aside all the flaws of the prosecution's office across this whole country, as a district attorney, you are supposed to have an unbiased opinion, so that way you can represent the victim to the best of your ability and get them justice, as well as sentence people fairly. If someone is literally writing violent things about a certain group, how are they going to do any of that? How are they going to do any of that? It's not possible. It's highly unlikely. And what is going to occur, and I would never work in crim because honestly, I don't have the stomach for it. I would think that most likely every single defendant that has represented a dark-skinned Black woman is likely going to file a motion to have their case reheard if he was the ADA on the case. And they should. Because who knows what he was doing with their cases. It should be noted he only became an ADA in 2021. So thankfully, there shouldn't be that many cases that he was on, but they should review those cases. There is very little public belief in the DA's office to begin with. And that's due, rightfully so, to all the commotion the DA does in every county. So that is where we are. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. All right. And with that, there is this. I just want to put this in there, which I borrowed this from BuzzFeed. I usually put all the citations, but BuzzFeed borrowed it from actual Twitter, which is Black men built large followings, some Black men, between 2010 and 2016 by being misogynistic, colorist, and downright nasty to Black women, because at one point that was an easy capital letters way to build a platform. Then some of them took a break and came back as feminists, chefs, lawyers, and I love Black women accounts. And I think that's the insidious nature of this entire conversation, which is, oh no, I changed. I didn't show you I changed in any way, but I said I changed, so we should just believe it and let's just all move about our business. And I'm making over here bad oxtail pasta. No. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I was trying to be nice. So a lot is marked. There were a lot of counts, because what's interesting is if you look at this has been reported on NBC News, on other non-majority Black outlets, I would say, people's first question is, why would he say that? Because there's rife with colorism in the Black community, but also it goes without saying, large account followings were built on the embarrassment, the harassment, the violent verbiage towards dark-skinned Black women. And without saying that part, it gets people are too focused on like, well, why did he do that? The why is irrelevant, but that's the why. That's the why. Do you think colorism can be a basis for retrial? The jurisprudence here would be odd. The interesting thing is colorism has been added to the Equal Employment Opportunity. I always forget if their C is Commission, Committee, Council, the EEOC, where you file that some discrimination has occurred to you. Colorism is something you can check and say, like, hey, the discrimination I faced, it wasn't racism, it was colorism. It is a box that you can check. So technically, you can file anything in the court of law, to be honest. Would it be a winning argument? I think given all the data and all of the statistics and the history, you could file a compelling argument that, of course, and if you coupled that with the actual statements that he has made, I think definitely so. All right. Crowned by K, thank you. What annoyed me by her statement is the deflection. She only addressed his substance abuse and treatment in the past as being taken into consideration to keep him as ADA. I agree. And again, my main question is, why would this person has worked there for a year? What is the purpose of this besides virtue signaling to people like this is not an issue that in our DA we care about? It's just awful. It's just very, very much awful. And this is, I think, what would come up more. And this would be most likely, hopefully, an investigative reporter with access would do a piece on this. I'm really thinking about the dark-skinned Black women victims of assaults, harassments, and partner violence in cases where he decided charges, because the district attorney has the discernment. They're allowed to have discernment. They're allowed to pick and choose whose case they bring to trial. In the Tory Lanez trial that we discussed ad nauseum, and people wrongfully were up in arms, like, she called the police on him, blah, blah. That's not what happened. First and foremost, she was within her right. She should have said all those things. The Los Angeles County pursued charges. It is the district attorney's prerogative to pursue charges. And based on those statements, this is 2016. He has been an ADA since 2021. This is 5 years later. It's not like so much time has passed. Oh, I would assume that if we look through and see whose cases he were like, no, that's not worthy of the time of the district attorney's office, we're going to see a disproportional impact. I would guess, to be honest. I would guess. She's going to get the headache now. I agree. She's going to get the headache now because people should and are rightfully so causing a ruckus about it. Because it's disgusting. It's disgusting behavior. And this type of behavior doesn't go away unless it is addressed. Exactly. Well, I appreciate y'all, and shame on it all. And I have the links for those statistics, for the studies. Oh, I didn't realize the blanket was in here the whole time. Lord have mercy. For the studies and for everything. So I'm going to link those in the comments. I'm not in the comments, in the description box in case you want to read them. There are some really good ones. So I think that would be, really helpful starting point. I would say overall, people seem to understand why this is an issue. And to take it a step further, I would hope that people understand why our criminal justice system, it needs a lot of upheaval to begin with. But if we're taking it as face value, you can't have somebody be a district attorney that has those beliefs. No. It's morally inappropriate. It's doing a disservice to the victims. Back to Blue Quartz's point. Again, if we're looking at the statistics that we went through earlier, dark-skinned Black women are more likely to be a victim of a violent crime. So these same women are likely being victimized twice if they finally do go to the courthouse and say, like, hey, I just want a restraining order. I want to be left alone. Like, this is commotion. Like, all these things happen to me. And then you have an ADA that's largely dismissive of the plight of dark-skinned Black women, and past dismissive is outright saying violent things towards dark-skinned Black women. Is re-victimizing people multiple times. All right. Well, I hate to leave y'all on a sad note, but like the video, I will share the resources. I'm not sure. So bar complaints are usually confidential, but I would assume that people in Texas have filed bar complaints about him. It should be noted, to be disbarred, you have to, in my opinion, this is egregious behavior. But in the view of the bar, you have to have egregious behavior and illegal behavior. And more likely than not, that illegal behavior has to be fraudulent. So I egregiously decided to be Joanne the scammer and stole my client's house. I put my name on the mortgage. I kicked them out, etc. Things like that. I don't think the bar, sadly, is going to give him any consequences, particularly because the district attorney is standing behind him, unfortunately. And it's gross. It's very gross behavior. I agree. I agree. Also, we should talk about who gets to talk about colorism. Light skinned folks are the folks who need to use the privilege to have these conversations. The onus is not on dark skinned Black women. Good breakdown, Steph. And on that note, there are dark skinned Black women that do put themselves out there on the internet and to talk about colorism, and often, sadly, are faced with large ridicules. So it is on the rest of us to support them and to uplift them. So I should have made a slide. So that's on me. But Myoa's World is a great channel. So let me put her channel on here. She talks about colorism as well as a lot about colonization. So let me put hers on here. And then the Darkest Hue on Instagram, which I've showed her Instagram a few times as well. So just to suggest some channels for y'all to follow that are largely doing a lot of the work, speaking out against colorism as well as keeping the conversations in the forefront. Let me find the Darkest Hue. Hold on. And she has a great channel. Yeah, great channel. I really enjoy it. It's not enough people talking about colonization on here. So always great to see somebody being like, nah, to hell with the crown still. To hell with the crown. All right. All right. So I appreciate y'all. On that note, we're early. Since we did our live today and not on Thursday, it's usually on Thursdays. Maybe we'll do on Thursday, maybe not. I'm gonna finally catch up with my edited content. I owe Candace, our editor, some videos, so I'm gonna do those. And yeah, so we're gonna finally get back into the swing of things. And I put a community post up. Go ahead and vote on the community post. I figured sometimes the actual lawsuits and filings that I think are interesting and helpful are few and far between. Some months it's not a busy legal season. So to combat that and to make sure we have content, I figured we would do a little mini series, a little placeholder series, sometimes either legal show reviews, so like Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, things like that, or we could do throwback lawsuits. So that's in the community tab post. So go ahead and vote and let me know which one y'all would like to do. So that way we keep everything going. So I appreciate y'all. And I feel like I missed somebody's super chat in the beginning. So let me make sure. Thank you, Themis. It is very disheartening and violent, to be honest, past disheartening. Okay, I think I got everyone. If I missed it, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you. That helps me stay in business. So, all right. I think maybe I got all of them then. Okay, I thought I missed one. All right. On that note, I will let y'all have a wonderful evening. And yes, all right. I'll appreciate y'all later. I'll see y'all later. I'm very much awake. Bye, y'all.